Hey everyone, I'm Wei. So some big news. Recently, Black Forest Lab, the creator of Flux, dropped multiple models all at once. And honestly, they are incredible. There are four main models to talk about. So let's dive right in. First up, there's the View model, which combines both inpainting and outpainting into one neat package. Super convenient, right? Then we have Depth and Canny, which you might already be familiar with. And finally, there's the Redux model, which works kind of like IP adapter for style transfer. Let me show you what these can do, starting with the inpainting feature. For example, take this man in a suit. Paint over the suit area and enter a prompt for denim jacket. Boom! The suit transforms seamlessly into a denim jacket, with the mask edges blending naturally. Now for outpainting, starting with just one eye. Using the View model, that single eye is expanded into a complete face, and the result is so smooth. You'd never guess it started with outpainting. Even though these models might seem a little overwhelming at first, I've simplified everything into one easy-to-follow workflow. I used the same reference image, the same prompt, and even the same seed across all node groups, so you can see clear side-by-side comparisons. Plus, if you want to use just a specific part of the workflow, you can copy and paste it to save time. I've added the download link in the description below. Feel free to grab it for free and give it a try. Now here's a quick heads up. If you're dragging this workflow into ConfigUI and hit errors, don't panic. Just update ConfigUI to the latest version and it'll work like a charm. After updating, I recommend running the workflow step by step, one node group at a time, to avoid overloading your GPU. So let's break down the workflow. On the far left, there's a basic settings node group. In the middle, we've got four node groups for things like ControlNet, Canny, and Depth. I call them ControlNet, but technically, they are not ControlNet models. Don't worry, I'll explain in a bit. Finally, on the right, there are three more node groups for inpainting, outpainting, and something like IP adapter. Let's start with the basics. I'm using the Anything Everywhere 3 node to pass the clip and the Wave models from left into all the other node groups. For the T5XXL clip model, you've got two options: the FP8 version or the higher precision FP16 version. The FP8 saves VRAM and disk space, but it's slightly less precise. To keep things consistent for comparison, I went with the same reference image and added an image resize node to make sure the image is not too large or small. Next, I set the same prompt across all node groups. It's a simple description of the reference image: a short-haired woman sitting cross-legged in a cafe, surrounded by potted plants, with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and casting dappled shadows. The idea is to leave some creative space for the Flux models to work their magic. Below that, there's a step to generate the Canny edge and depth map. So that's our basic setup. Let's move on to the ControlNet models from Black Forest Lab. First, let's check out the Canny node group. The Canny model is loaded using the Load Diffusion Model node. You just drop it into the Diffusion Models folder under Models. In this sense, it acts more like a checkpoint than a traditional ControlNet model, and it connects directly to the model input port of the K-sampler. Here's where things get interesting: the instruct pix-to-pix conditioning node. Originally, this was meant to edit images based on prompts, but here, it works similar to the apply ControlNet node. The big difference? It doesn't have as many adjustable parameters, but it still does the job. The Canny edge data is fed right into this node. One thing to note is that the final image will have the same resolution as the Canny edge map. You can adjust this through the Canny edge node. In my case, I set it to 1024, so the final image comes out at 1024 by 1024. Also, don't forget to tweak the Flux guidance node. Setting it to a high value, like 30, really improves the results. When comparing the reference image to the final output, the accuracy is okay, and the overall quality is way better than ControlNet models from X Labs or Instant X Shaker Labs. In fact, when you zoom in, you'll notice even tiny details like skin texture and sweat hairs are rendered beautifully. If the original Canny model doesn't quite fit your workflow, Black Forest Lab has you covered with the LoRa model that functionality. This alternative node group uses the LoRa to handle Canny control. You can store the Canny LoRa alongside your other LoRa files, and it pairs seamlessly with other Flux-based fine-tuned models. For example, you can load models like Stoical New Reality into the Load Diffusion Model node for creative possibilities. If you're curious about Flux-based fine-tuned models, I covered 4 of them in a previous video. Feel free to check that out. Now, the rest of the setup in this LoRa node group is pretty similar to the original Canny node group we discussed earlier. However, here's the catch. When we compare the reference image with the final output, the results from the Canny LoRa aren't nearly as good as those from the original Canny node group. It's a noticeable drop in quality. So while it's a decent backup option, the original Canny setup still delivers the best performance. Now let's talk about depth. The two depth ControlNet node groups work in a way that's pretty similar to the Canny node groups. And just like the Canny, Black Forest Lab also has provided a depth LoRa as an alternative. Let's take a look at the results. The depth model does a good job overall, though its lighting effects aren't quite as strong or detailed as what the Canny model produces. That said, the image quality is still solid and perfectly usable. Now, when it comes to the depth LoRa node group, the results are actually a little better than what we got with the Canny LoRa node group. So while it's not as strong as the original depth model, it does provide a slight edge over the Canny LoRa in terms of quality. Moving on to inpainting and outpainting. These two are pretty similar. The inpainting node group lets you paint a mask over an area you want to change, while the outpainting group uses the path image for outpainting node to define the areas you want to expand. Both rely on the fill model, which you'll need to place in the diffusion models folder. For inpainting, I changed the woman's short hair style to a different style of short hair, and the transition is flawless. It blends perfectly with the rest of the image. For outpainting, I extended the image. And again, the results are super smooth. You'd never notice where the original image ends and the new parts begin. Lastly, we have the Redux model, which is used for style transfer. This node group is a little different from the others. It's kind of like the IP adapter in SDXL. You'll need to load the Clip Vision model here, and the Load Style model node is used to bring in the Redux model, which Black Forest Lab provides as a style transfer. This model needs to be stored in the Style Models folder under Models. The Redux model is small, just over 100 megabytes, so it works well with other checkpoints. For example, I paired it with the Pixel Wave fine-tuned model, and the results are fantastic. The generated image closely match the original style and have excellent quality, thanks to Pixel Wave. To sum it up, these models from Black Forest Lab are seriously impressive. That said, they are not without a few downsides. Many of them function like checkpoints, which means you need a checkpoint loader to use them, making it tricky to combine them with other Flux-based models. Plus, they are huge. Some are over 20 gigabytes, so they can be a bit of a storage hog. Still, they are pretty easy on VRAM. I have 20 gigabytes of VRAM, and everything runs smoothly. I'm hopeful these minor issues will get ironed out soon. Remember when the original Flux model was over 20 gigabytes? We eventually got an FP8 version and even a GGUF version. I bet we'll see similar improvements with these new models. Maybe even some fine-tuning for better quality or new styles. Let's see what happens. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.